Only mode.
Good morning. Welcome, good afternoon rather. Welcome to the first SSP Professional Development Committee webinar of the new academic year. My name is Charles Watkinson and I'm co-chair of the Professional Development Committee with my colleague Marianne Parker. So today we have the first of a new format of webinars called My Life in Publishing. The aim of these webinars is to introduce early career professionals and aspiring publishers to the rich variety of careers available within scholarly publishing. And in each webinar, an experienced publisher will give insights into their life and work and then open up for questions and discussions. So with this particular webinar, we very much hope that we will have plenty of discussion, plenty of questions coming in. And I want to take a moment to just let you know how the questions will be handled. On your screens, you should see a section on the right-hand side where it prompts you to type in a question. In that box, please submit the questions, and I will be monitoring them. If they're burning questions asking, for example, for clarification, I will ask Victoria your question as she's going. But otherwise, I propose to leave questions until the end of the presentation. Please don't hesitate to type a question as soon as it occurs to you, and I will keep an eye out for it. So now it's my great pleasure to be able to introduce the speaker today, who is Victoria Ray, Commissioning Editor at ICE Publishing. Although Victoria is English, she works in Texas, and I think one of the things she'll cover is the opportunities for remote working that occur within scholarly publishing and the flexible nature of the career. But without further ado, let me hand you over to Victoria, who will now speak on My Life in Publishing. Over to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Charles. Hi there. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about my life in publishing. I think it's maybe a relatively short life so far, but over the course of this webinar, I hope to be able to share with you some insights and experiences of how I got to where I am now. So we can kick off with just an outline for today's session. And I'm going to base this talk on some information that features on my SSP career profile, and if you want to know where I grew up or what I do in my free time or what I think about the future of scholarly publishing, then you can go onto the link there and read my profile online. I'm also going to be talking about my education and early career experiences in scholarly publishing, and also a bit about my current role at ICE Publishing, which is the Institution of Civil Engineers in the UK. And this will include a little bit about the development and launch of new science products in interdisciplinary subjects, global expansion of the ICE, and what it's like to work with international editors and authors. I'll also touch a bit upon the evolving nature of journals publishing, including online platforms and a variety of business models. And then to finish off, I'll talk about what it's like to work remotely, and then we'll have time for some question and answers. So my early career and education experiences. So I did my degree in publishing with English at Loughborough University in the UK. It's just near Nottingham and Leicester in the Midlands. I'd always been interested in books and reading, but I never really even considered a career in publishing, let alone in scholarly communication. I think the course appealed to me because it allowed me to study English literature and language whilst being part of the Department of Information Science. So I was able to acquire new skills in research, data organization, knowledge management, and learn about all aspects of the publishing industry. So we had lectures on magazines and newspapers, children's books, academic journals, desktop design and publishing, and the book trade. And then in my third year as an undergraduate, I undertook a one-year work placement as a journal's editorial assistant at Sage Publications in London. And this was my first taste of scholarly publishing. So in addition to assisting the editorial team with administrative tasks and conducting due diligence work for the acquisition editors, I developed a non-subscription sales revenue for the medical list. And one of the journals was the Journal of Psychopharmacology here. And I worked with pharmaceutical companies on sponsored supplements for this journal. I also constructed an in-house database for the medical journal program, and this database recorded potential sources of non-subscription sales revenue, as well as tracking ongoing journal supplement projects. So I think I gained great experience working for an international organization like SAGE, and SAGE has offices all around the world now, in addition to a wider understanding of developing my academic career and just what was going on really in the industry. So I took all of this experience back to me with Loughborough, to Loughborough, and in my final year of study at Loughborough, I did my research dissertation on open access publishing and the viability of open access models for commercially scholarly journal publishers. So for those maybe that are new to the term of open access, Gold Open Access is a model whereby users can access content without paying a fee. So instead of libraries subscribing to a journal, publishers make the content immediately free, and articles are funded by a payment commonly known as an article publication charge. And this is paid by each author when an article is accepted. So at the time when I did my dissertation, open access business models were fairly new, and several publishers were beginning to evaluate options and do some experimental research. And the conclusions I found was that it was yet unproven whether a viable business model for open access could exist. And funding for APCs were still fairly new, and APC charges were typically about $3,000, so they're quite expensive. But my project supervisor, Professor Fitton-Rowland, and I, we later adapted my work in 2006, and we published it in the UK SG journal Serials. But now this is called Insights. Then after I graduated and I had a brief break in Japan, I continued working in journals publishing as a managing editor at Palgrave Macmillan. And I was responsible for all aspects of journal development and management, budgeting and commissioning, and editorial control for business and finance journals, so one of which was the Journal of Banking Regulation. I was responsible also for business development in this area, so primarily investigating and building relationships with societies and offering publishing partnership opportunities. And then I joined ICE Publishing as their new commissioning editor for science. So ICE Publishing is the Institution of Civil Engineers, and I started there in 2010 as a commissioning editor, specializing in physical sciences and applied sciences. So the picture on the left here is the ICE headquarters in Westminster in London. It's very central near Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament. And ICE Publishing is the commercial division of the Institution of Civil Engineers. And ICE was established in 1818, so it's very old, and it has over 80,000 members around the globe. And these are primarily practicing civil engineers working in industry. But in 2011, I relocated to the US, spending 1 year in Washington, DC. And then now, as Charles said, that I'm based in Austin in Texas. So the picture on the right is the Capitol building here in Austin. I don't actually work there. My home is not as impressive as either of these two buildings, but that's where I'm based now. And I recognize Texas is not the publishing capital of the US, but I think I've been fortunate enough to continue working at ICE Publishing, developing the journals I initially launched. I think it's worked out quite well for the ICE as well, because it's definitely strengthened their presence in America too. So moving on, I'll just talk a little bit about ICE Publishing in general, and then move on to my science titles. So ICE Publishing produces a wide range of publications sharing expert advice, leading research and best practice in civil engineering, construction, material science, environmental science. We essentially support the institution's commitment to knowledge transfer and best practice within civil engineering and construction. And we have flagship publications in civil engineering that are well known throughout the world, and we've been continuously publishing content since 1836. And examples of our books and journals are on the screen here. But more recently, ICE Publishing has expanded into wider engineering and science subjects with the launch of the Science Series. And this is a collection of journals in interdisciplinary physical sciences. And I commissioned the first 3 titles in 2011, and I continue to develop new journals each year. So as the commissioning editor, I research new disciplines and markets. I produce financial budgets and editorial contracts. I write publishing proposals and annual reports. I liaise with internal departments and external editors and societies and suppliers in order to launch these new journals, and also develop society partnerships and acquire new content. So I explore new publishing models as well, including open access, in order to develop our publishing strategy and meet the business goals. So recently we've just finalized hybrid open access pricing and launched a gold open access journal in geotechnical research, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But now moving on to the Science Series. So these are the first 5 ICE Science journals which are now available. And the main field is material science, but you've got nanomaterials, biomaterials, green chemistry, surface engineering. And the goal of ICE Science is to bring together communities that traditionally work in silos to inspire fresh thinking and how breakthrough research can be practically applied. So the initial researching and setting up series was quite exciting because I had a relatively blank canvas. So I enjoy looking into new topics and learning about emerging areas of development and meeting people in the field who I could potentially work with, and we could lead a new journal together. I think there are so many possibilities, and I've been fortunate to build some great relationships with editors and board members and authors. And I look forward to attending conferences and talking with delegates, building partnerships with societies and symposium committees. I'm always open to hear new ideas and suggestions and make new contacts, because I think you never know when an opportunity may arise for a new product just from having a conversation with someone. However, there have been some challenges along the way, and we're still experiencing these now. So after a few years of publishing content, there's always challenges to face. I think we always knew it was going to be difficult to launch a new product in a new market. The material science community I started to engage with had never really heard of the ICE, and some questioned why civil engineers would want to get involved with nanotechnology and biomaterials and green chemistry. So I had people asking if we specialize in ice, like the kind that you put in your drink, or whether we're corrosion experts, or some people get mixed up with chemical engineers. So it was quite fun explaining who we were and what ICE stood for. But there are always also a lot of successful and popular publications already out there in the market. And most of the researchers were familiar with these big publishers like Elsevier and Wiley, but as well as the more established societies like American Chemical Society or Materials Research Society. So on top of that, now we've set up the editorial boards and we're publishing regular articles. Questions are beginning to arise over journal impact factors and the rank of the science journals. So there's always ongoing challenges as well of library budgets and subscription sales. So not just focusing on the journals and the content, but now selling the journals as well to the institutions in the library market. So we actually offered free online access in the first volume of content so that researchers would be able to access the articles, and we begin to build a community of readers and authors, together with increasing the awareness of the Science Series. So this year, as I mentioned before, we're looking into open access models that can serve civil engineering market as well as the new material science community. So we're offering hybrid gold open access to our journals content from 2014, and we're going to be launching a new 100% gold OA journal in geotechnical research. So the two subjects move at different paces, and funding and attitudes of researchers mirror this. I think the same applies to impact factors and article metrics. So whilst material scientists and academic scholars in general are very aware of usage and citations and ranking, most of our civil engineering readers and authors are practitioner-based, and they're less likely to worry too much about if a journal has a high impact factor or if their personal ranking is increasing over time. So, as I mentioned earlier, the majority of these members are non-academics, they're practicing civil engineers. So their needs and demands for the type of content we publish have to reflect this, as well as what we're trying to achieve with our science collection. But I think regardless of subject discipline, having all of your online content in one place is a really valuable asset. So our virtual library platform here, this serves the ICE membership, and it serves all of our ICE publishing customers around the world, and it's the most comprehensive online civil engineering resource in the world, where users can explore archives back to 1836, they browse international journal articles, and they can access over 1,500 print and ebooks. So it's actually, I think, brought both civil engineers and scientists closer together. So for example, if a user is interested in solar cells, they may discover an article from our Nanomaterials and Energy journal, but they also may find articles and book chapters in engineering sustainability, construction materials, structures and buildings. So in addition, our Biomaterials journal actually recently published some work on solar cells in butterfly wings. So to a civil engineer, they may be interested in solar energy on buildings, but they may never have considered reading research about butterflies. So I think it's important to be aware of your market and the customers you serve, but don't necessarily put them in a box. And I think expanding into new areas can actually benefit your existing markets as well as open up new opportunities. So moving on, I just want to say a little bit about remote working. So I Googled remote working, and these are some of the images I found. So I think it takes a certain type of person to work from home, and I've worked in open plan office environments before. I've worked in sort of hot desking situations, and I've had my own office as well, but I've worked remotely from libraries and coffee shops. I've never worked on a beach like this guy in the picture, but I do like that independence and solitude of working remotely. But I think sometimes this can feel quite isolated and lonely. But I don't sit around in my pajamas all day at the kitchen table. I do drink a lot of tea though. I do have a dedicated work space. We've got a spare room in my house which I've turned into an office. I've got high-speed internet connection, and I use Skype, WebEx teleconferencing software. I've got access to all my work folders and systems via a virtual private network in the UK on servers in London. And I do have a cat, but like this picture here, he doesn't do any of my work for me. So just continue a little bit more about remote working. So I don't have a normal 9-to-5 work day. I think you have to account for global time zones, just like with any sort of business, but especially in publishing. So there's 6 hours time difference between the UK and Texas. There's 4 time zones in the US alone. And when I was setting up a new journal in environmental geotechniques, I used to Skype my Indian editor at about 6:30 in the morning, and he'd be on his iPad having dinner with his wife. But then I could be talking to an American editor on my mobile at 7 in the evening whilst I was cooking dinner. So I think you do have to be flexible with your workday, but it's important to set boundaries. But I think you can be very productive and get into a productive routine which is very unique to your own situation. So I don't have any office noise or distraction, but that's sort of both unwanted conversations in an open plan office, but also I miss those water cooler moments, or so just being aware of what colleagues did at the weekend. So I don't really have that interaction, but I can eat at my desk or listen to the radio, and sometimes I might go to the university library and to get a change of scenery. And also popular in Austin at the minute are the co-working spaces where I think they've recently started up, and you can go and you can sort of be part of a shared office environment. I've not tried them out, but I might go and see what they're like just to meet other remote independent workers. But I do keep in touch with my colleagues, you know, every day via email and Skype and teleconferencing and even instant messaging. But I think that none of these can replace face-to-face meetings. I think you get faster and more accurate answers when you're, you know, all together in one room, and more collective answers, especially in larger team meetings. And I know that, you know, technology is great, but sometimes it does fail. And, you know, I am reliant on the service in the UK, and, you know, IT help desk can't just pop to my workstation and fix a networking problem. But I think, you know, I guess there are pros and cons to remote working, as with any situation. So in conclusion, I would just like to highlight a couple of things I've discovered as I've developed my career in scholarly publishing. So firstly, I don't have a scientific degree, and I'm not a civil engineer, and when I worked at Palgrave Macmillan on the finance journals, I didn't really have any, you know, financial knowledge. But I do have, you know, an open mind, and I am eager to learn about the subjects I work with. So no matter what kind of scholarly research is being done, it's really fascinating to be part of that process. And when I started my publishing career, or even at university, I never really had my heart set on being a commissioning editor, but I think it's something that naturally evolved over time. And the jobs I had and the experiences I've had led me to where I am now. So, you know, I don't have that academic professional background, but I think having an understanding in scholarly research does help you. So especially when forming relationships and communicating with authors and editors. I think we've all studied and conducted research at university. We've all been in touch with lecturers and professors, and I think being aware of the tenure process in the US or the Research Excellence Framework in the UK helps to understand where academics are coming from, in addition to the funding sources like the National Science Foundation and government policies on open access, or just, you know, higher education in general. So I like that research, and I like developing ideas and building, you know, projects, working with others to make something a success. I like meeting new people, both academics and those in publishing. So scholarly publishing, I think, is quite a small world, but it's, you know, great organisations like the SSP that, you know, bring us all together. So I may not, you know, be a young professional anymore, and, you know, I've sort of, it's been a while since I started my career in scholarly publishing, but I do think it is a pathway and it is a journey, and I feel that I've still got so much to learn, and there's always plenty of opportunities in this industry to develop. So for now, you know, I might not have ruby slippers, but I am happy to keep following the yellow brick road. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions if Charles has any that people have passed on to him.
Yes, Victoria, thank you very much. I do have a few questions that have come in. The first question is, would you advise people to pursue a formal publishing course? You mentioned that at Loughborough you did have this publishing component of your course. And there's a follow-on question about that, which was, what do you think was the most useful thing you learnt in that formal publishing course?
Well, as I said, my publishing degree was an undergraduate degree, and I think that I know that there are lots of programs out there that offer publishing and information science. I think maybe that it's more popular that there are master's programs and diploma, postgraduate study. So I think, you know, some sort of formal course, it does help you. I'm not saying that sort of, you know, people with degrees in English or history or science, for that matter, sort of, you know, they all still work in the scholarly publishing arena. But I found that having the sort of the 3 years experience together with that work experience opportunity, I think that internship program definitely sort of appealed to me. It's certainly, I know that now with master's degrees, had I not maybe done a publishing degree to start with at undergraduate level, I would have maybe pursued something in sort of, you know, postgraduate level, whether it was a diploma or a one-year course, some sort of master's in scholarly publishing. I really benefited from the classroom environment and the lectures, and also though that opportunity for work experience. I think the two go hand in hand. So, sort of the work experience in getting your foot in the door at a publishing company, but also learning the theory or just sort of learning the research environment. And I think from my course I did benefit from those research techniques and sort of the information science side of the publishing. As much as I love English and studying the literature and the language side of my course, the sort of the research data organization, it helped me, I think, understand what sort of my authors and editors and the professors at universities that I work with, what they go through when they are sort of researching, what they sort of through their career profiles, because they don't just teach students, they have to get the funding to do the research and sort of their research methodology and their discussions and how they then submit articles to publishers. So it's, in a way, it's good to have experience on both sides of the fence.
Can I just sort of drill down a bit on the question about specifically in a publishing course, in your succeeding publishing career, what was it that you learned in that publishing component which you found most useful?
I think sort of that overview of the publishing industry in general allowed me to then sort of go down the route of the journal side, and I think the opportunity to do the internship at Sage then really focused my career in scholarly publishing. But I think having sort of that overview, so we learned about children's books and magazines and newspapers, so getting that overview was really interesting and quite informative, because there are so many, I think, branches to publishing in general. But then apply from the Department of Information Science, we had sort of lectures and we had to do work on sort of knowledge management and research techniques, and there was sort of courses on studying and negotiating contracts. So that side of the course really sort of allowed me, I could apply those things that I learned in the classroom to my work now when I'm sort of researching new areas. I know where to go, I know how to conduct sort of research studies rather than just typing in keywords into Google. I know how to sort of negotiate contracts and draft those and things like that. So I think it was many years ago since I did graduate, but I think that classroom experience certainly helps me now in my day-to-day job.
So there's a question come in from Mariam Rona here. She says, thank you so much for this great presentation. What are the skills you recommend students to build before entering the work environment?
I think, well, maybe in general, I think organisation is a good one to have, just general life, and communication. Certainly, whether it's so working on your communication skills and your organisation skills, sort of what you never know, sort of especially with the publishing industry, who you're going to meet. Sort of you've got to sort of be professional and be prepared. So being organised, and as I said, I'm not an expert in chemistry or in nanomaterials, but I sort of I like to think I'm an expert and I know sort of about that publishing process. So I think being organised and able to communicate sort of effectively where you're coming from and what you want to achieve, especially starting out a new project or a new idea for a new journal and things like that, especially in editorial and commissioning, because you're always meeting, you're always talking to potential authors and editors and societies. So sort of being organised, having good written and spoken communication skills, but also then hand in hand with communication is listening skills. So listening to people's ideas, listening to editors, maybe an author's, if an author says they're going to submit a manuscript or submit a proposal, but then they've got a funding deadline, or they've got reviews, or they've got classroom schedules to prepare, and so it's like listening and understanding where they're coming from, I think, is just as important as communicating your own ideas. So I think organisation and communication are two key things, and I think research techniques are quite good. Sort of if you want to look into new areas and find a person, or sort of find a topic, find funding which is available, which you then can pursue sort of new products in publishing. So you've got to sort of have that methodical process and sort of go along. And I think it's good to sort of be organized and find out, you know, the process in where you can find people and find money and find research opportunities, and then you follow those routes.
Here's another one. A recent survey of publishing employers suggested that digital skills were one of the top requirements of publishers for their new employees. But what do you understand by that answer? What do you consider the level and type of digital skills a publisher should be bringing into the marketplace now? A new publisher trying to, a new employee, what kind of digital skills would a publisher be looking for?
Yeah, I definitely think digital, skills or IT and technology. Again, maybe you don't need an IT degree, but I think some understanding of basic computer literacy is essential. So not only just dealing with sort of your word processor and sort of the internet and things like that. But I think so much now in publishing and research is going online, everything's becoming electronic, and even the conferences like the SSP annual conference and other publishing conferences I attend, there's a lot of focus on technology and electronic content and that sort of development of sort of digital content. So being aware of what's happening with sort of just in general, so what's happening with Google or with Apple and the latest developments with technology and technology providers, I think that's important to have, as well as maybe developing sort of your basic computer literacy skills. I think if you want to maybe go down the route of production, then having an understanding of sort of HTML and XML, that sort of generation, and the design functions for desktop publishing, that's very useful. Even at university we did courses on electronic publishing and desktop design, and that was really interesting to sort of focus the computer, the information technology side of publishing is definitely developing. So I'd say, yeah, make sure you're up to speed with just basic computer literacy, but then also maybe pay attention to what's happening in the wider sort of IT field, because I think that's definitely the way that publishing content is moving.
I'm going to stop you a moment here and ask you to transfer control of the screen over to Anne. Okay. I want to be sure that people get a look at the landing page for the Professional Development Committee, which includes a lot of useful information about getting into scholarly publishing, and also links to a profile of Victoria that she mentioned earlier in the talk, and you'll see it appearing on your screens now. Victoria, there are some questions now coming in which turn to your view of the current state of publishing. One of the ones I've received here actually comes from our colleague Marianne Parker, and it asks, what types of interactive publishing does ICE offer? And I'd like to expand a little bit on that question, particularly in the context of your new series of material science journals, to ask more generally about the innovations in presentation that you're including now in these journals. Okay,
so as I said, yeah, a lot of content's online. It's all available on our virtual library platform. I think I recognise maybe that civil engineers are maybe not as up to speed and tech savvy as other areas of sort of the academic world, but I do think that having a database we've archived a lot of our old content, and having everything that's available on that one platform is a great asset for ICE publishing and all the members and the civil engineers and scientists that we serve. So I think having the sort of that search functionality is a good thing for our virtual library platform, and we give users the ability to sort of search down to an article level. They can access and they can purchase a journal article or a book chapter, so they're not required to purchase the whole journal issue or buy the whole book. So it's at the level of sort of breaking down and presenting information sort of to what users actually want. In terms of being interactive with our users, I think we've got the basic social media, sort of Twitter and we don't have Facebook, but we've got Twitter accounts, we've got LinkedIn profiles, and we link into the ICE website, the institutional website there, and there's forums and discussions on the ICE website. So there's that level of interaction with our members, and everything is online in terms of the submission and peer review process as well. So if an author wanted to submit a paper to a journal, everything is electronic, everything's online, and it's published online as soon as an article's been accepted. So we have the ahead of print section of our website, so each journal has an AOP section, so articles aren't sort of held for the print edition. So everything really is turning towards digital technology now.
And I mean, especially in the area of nanomaterials, I think we're seeing, and sorry, this is sort of editorial commentary by me, but we are seeing here at Purdue, we have a strong nanotechnology community. But I know they're very interested in things like